We are a collective of over 60 California grassroots groups. We founded the coalition to be as effective as possible to harness the power of grassroots activists all over California and the country to win elections. And these elections are in races all over the country that are key elections we need to win coming into the midterms in 2026, but also this year in Virginia and New Jersey, where we have big state legislature races. We use phone banking, canvassing, voter registration. We lead trainings, and plus we have this this amazing speaker series. The whole point of today is taking action. So please visit our website, and I think you all have that in chat right now. I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to start our conversation
Thank you,
now.
Susan.
Thank you.
Susan, who is our fearless leader, and we do these Zooms all the time. And we're Joan Baez. It's just wonderful to see you. Thank you for being here with us today. And we'd love to give you a chance to talk a little. You sat with us the weekend before the 2024 elections, and you just filled us with a real sense of purpose. And it was a beautiful moment. We all remember it. And here you are now in this really critical moment. So I'm going to give the floor to you to speak and to sing. So thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you for having me. So I'll start with this. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains' majesties above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed her grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from the sea to shining sea, and crown thy good with sisterhood from sea to shining sea. So then I will lighten things up a little bit. I'm going to paraphrase myself with a poem, which I haven't quite memorized, but it's called Marbles. Oh gosh, said the lead sycophant, looks like our king is down to his last marble. And he turned the king's head on the side and gave him a good swat on the upside cheek. And sure enough, a marble rolled out and it fell into this golden ashtray, and it spun around slowly for a brief moment, and then it took off at great speed towards the barren desert, singing, "Roll me up and smoke me while I die." In the meantime, during all the chaos, the king's crown fell off, which left the sycophants ever so briefly out of a job. So those are my two contributions to the beginning of this. I wanted to thank Heather Cox Richardson for being one of the lifelines that myself and my friends have had during this whole time. It's not an easy thing to write something where you're walking that line between total despair and what do we do, and then some hope, and you've done that successfully, and we appreciate that. And when people, well, actually over the years have said, well, what do I do? What can I do? And I'm only one person, etc. And from my own point of view, there are different answers to that. The one that makes the most sense to me and has helped some people make sense to them is that each person find what it is that calls you. Something is something you really feel strongly about and are devoted to, and do it. Just do it. Even if it's just you, hopefully you find other people to do it with you, because that's another terribly important part of this, which is community. And we talk about it, and sometimes we have it, like you all here today. That's a community. And we need that to bolster each other to carry this on. It is, people say to me, was the 60s like this? And I say the 60s was a garden party. It has nothing to do with what's going on now. None of us could have written this. None of us could have thought it up. And here we are very rapidly in the middle of it, the speed being one of the things that makes it so difficult. I think that there are lots of different things that we're facing. One is the high on the agenda of the MAGA world is cruelty. And it's important to really say, how could they this? How could they do this? How come? And the how come, and how part of that how come is cruelty, that it's enjoyable for some people to watch other people suffering. And I know that the word empathy in that world has been eliminated because it's associated with pity, and and caring. So part of our job is, of course, to bring that in whenever we can. I don't know where I read it, but there's compassion, which is feeling something for somebody, feeling sorry for them, caring for them, but empathy is really becoming them and really feeling what it is that's going on for that person. That's part of our job as well, since that's totally missing on the other side. They don't have any understanding of it, and in our actions still never give up on the possible chance that whatever act of empathy and caring you show, somewhere it might leak through to the other side. So we have to hang on to that. And it's a point in time when almost any act of strength, caring, dancing, singing in a certain context becomes an act of resistance. And we need to hang on to that and do it, and find the friends to do it with us, and keep talking and keep loving, and be prepared to take a risk. And I think the risk part is the difficult part, because you can make all sorts of changes. I don't think any real social change takes place without somebody being willing to take risks. And if that's going to be us, then it's going to be us. That's a tough one, because the risks now are higher than any time in my life that I've known in this country. I've visited and sung in other countries which are under dictatorships, which we never thought could happen here, and now it's happening. So just to keep in my mind, to say to somebody, go take a risk, that it is higher risk than I ever knew could happen here where I live. So let's see, what will I say now? I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no hate and bigotry turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no hate and bigotry turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, gonna build a brand new world. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, no. Turn me around, no. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on singing, keep on swinging, marching up to freedom land. It's all yours.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. And of course, that was a song you sang with Justin Jones. And I always think of, that young man. And he's one of those people that other younger people see. And that's precisely what we need. This idea that you talked about, empathy leaking in, was just, I never really thought of it that way. But that small act was remarkable. So it's about 2:15. I want to bring Heather in. I want to just officially introduce the two of you amazing women to each other. Heather Cox Richardson, this is Joan Baez. Joan Baez, Heather Cox Richardson. I tell you what, I'm just going to mute myself. I just want to listen.
Well, then I'm going to speak first after all those really kind words you said about me. I am starstruck, and I want you to know that it's not just your music that made a big difference to me. that when I was talking earlier today with somebody who had also, spent our lives listening to you, the songs that were the most important to me, and let's see if you see the pattern, was Plane Wreck at Los Gatos and Joe Hill. And I sang my kids to sleep with Joe Hill as long as I sang them to sleep. And it was your sense of history and why that mattered and how people could pull together behind music that I think had a huge influence on me on how I try and write and pull people together now. So it's such a joy to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you. And Joe Hill is famous everywhere. And I sang it in somewhere in the Eastern Bloc years ago. And the audience loved it, but they didn't really know what it's about, because their politics was not the same. And I had a dissident friend back then. He said, "This is a beautiful song, beautiful song. They just wrote about the wrong guy." But
So,
they did.
so can I ask you about that though? Because I've been wondering a lot about how you pull people together to recreate a democracy, and music seems to me so extraordinarily important. And I wonder if you have ideas about why it's so important.
I think it is the only or the foremost thing that crosses borders. I mean, it was like a joke that I just told you, but that song has reached into the hearts of people of all different politics. I mean, any of us could say what we were deeply moved by, and it is the music. And I wouldn't want to be part of a movement that didn't have music with it. And I'm going to sing you a little tiny piece that Janice Ian just sent to me, because I've been looking for something, and she calls it One in a Million. We are one in a million, we're 1 in a million strong. Though I did it, ba-da-ba-bum, they will brighten all the day. We are 1 in a million strong.
Do you think it is the ideas in the song or the sense that when you are listening to it, you're part of a community that values community, empathy, love, relationships, or maybe they both work together?
I was going to say they have to work together. And sometimes just the music itself, because it's beautiful and it moves you, it moves your heart, then it opens you up, in my opinion, to greater things or more things. And yes, when we all sing together, it's a special kind of community in my mind. There was some discussion about an army that was marching, and somebody said, "Which side are they on?" And he said, "Well, they can't be the Russians because the Russians are always singing." And there was no music coming out of this group of people, whoever it was.
Interesting. Do you think there are ways that somebody like me could use American music to reinforce the idea of democracy in our history?
Oh, I'm sure there is. But I'm thinking in some countries, they already have this stockpile of things you can sing. I think it was in Italy, my band and I at one point, and the table next to us, they were singing song after song. And I realized that we don't do that in this country. And we all felt very guilty when they looked over the sort of, "Okay, your turn." And we rattled up something, but it wasn't anything compared to having this history that your family sang. And so maybe that's something we have to work on.
Yeah, I wonder what you'd put on that list. I mean, the song you began with is a great American song. I wonder what else there. And of course, for someone like me, Joe Hill. But I actually almost wrote my dissertation on Joseph Hillstrom after growing up on that song. So I wonder if there's other things like that though, because you're right, we don't have the Marseillaise.
Well, Janice volunteered that song a while back, and then suddenly realized how apropos it is right now. But a guy named Josh Ritter singer-songwriter I've sung with before, and I asked him, I said, can you create some kind of anthem that people can sing now? And he's written a beautiful song. I only remember part of it at the moment, but it's the chorus. I carried the flame, I carried the flame. Let it always be said when you speak of my name that I carried the flame. And something like that, you know, has in my mind a possibility of, I sang it at a little gathering on May 1st in California. There's a high note I can't get to, but it's basically like this. I carry the flame. I carry the flame. Let it always be said when you speak of my name. I carry the flame. Very soon the whole group was singing that with me.
So, you know, I know your time's really limited, but I have a question though. One of the things that really jumps out to me in this moment and really jumps out to me is the degree to which the people carrying the flame are women, especially older women. And my theory is that we are the first generation of humans to have 30 to 40 years after our kids have left home, after our careers have been wherever, you know, to whatever level we wanted them to be. And we're reinventing ourselves in that second life, if you will, as people who care about principles and democracy. Is that right, do you think? Does it feel different to you than other movements you've been part of?
I don't know, but I have to say, when I walked into a restaurant bar today and some guy was sitting having a beer or something, he turned to me and he said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I came to watch the Pope. I came to watch the new Pope come out." And he said, "Is he going to be a woman?" I said, "Probably not yet, but you know, you're on the right track."
Oh, I knew it was going to be great listening to the two of you, and I'm interrupting just because I know your time is precious, Joan, and you probably have to be going. But I think that I feel like you two you could go on tour together, and we certainly have to start that list of songs. I do love this idea, and I'm just thinking about walking through certain towns in our country. You know, being in Memphis or in Nashville, in Austin, and hearing music all around, and what, you know, how different that is from being, you know, here. I live in Marin County, where I know there are so many musicians, and yet I don't hear people singing, you know, unless it's a paid for event or something. And
Right.
every now and then someone will come to our town square in Mill Valley, but generally speaking, I like this crusade of music, and certainly a way to be in this moment of you know, intense resistance that we have to build. So
You
I,
can only encourage people to write, you know,
Yeah.
that's all the moment. And it has to come somehow naturally. And I'm not sure what brings that on. But, you know, if you're gifted like Janice Ian, you can do that. If you're gifted like Josh, you can do that. I wouldn't attempt to write an anthem. You know, it seems completely out of my sphere.
well, I certainly love your poem and the visuals of the marbles rolling to the golden ashtray with the sycophants around. That's it's absolutely perfect.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank Camille, who got everything set up technically for you. You sounded fabulous, really good sound. Thank you, Camille. You're,
Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much.
it really felt like family today, Joan. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Joan. I'm just gobsmacked that I got to meet you. I hope someday we do it in person.
Okay, I'm sure we will.
Okay, can I do that too? Come to California.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Wow. Wow. I had a feeling it might be special, and it certainly was. Well, Heather,
Yeah,
welcome.
I'm serious, man. Joe Hill, plane wreck at Los Gatos. I
What-
can still remember sitting in the farmhouse listening to that, and uh, and thinking that there's a whole world out there I got to know a lot more about.
That is the thing about music. I can't think particularly of the song, but it does. Well, actually, I can think of a song early in my life. It wasn't Joe Hill. It wasn't an anthem really, but I remember hearing the Kinks and Lola, and listening to this kind of, they were certainly speaking about an alternative way to live. And I didn't think it was funny. I thought, what is that? And so music does, especially if you're a girl like me who grew up in a small town, you know, it's, what is it? What is that thing?
Right. I remember actually talking to my mother about it and and asking where was this? There's a line in that in Plane Wreck at Los Gatos. The oranges are piled in their creosote dumps.
Mm.
And I was like, I knew what creosote was. And I was like to my mother, why would somebody dump creosote on oranges? And that's the first time she really explained the Depression to me. And of course, she had lived through the Depression. And that shortly after that was the first time I read The Grapes of Wrath. Because I wanted to know more about the Depression. So it's just funny how that kind of thing works into your consciousness and speaks to different people in different ways, because I'm sure other people got something entirely different out of it than I did.
Sure. Well, we're so happy that you were here. You were this inquisitive child, and you've taken it to the next level. My goodness. Thank you for being the historian for all of us. I grew up and became a disc jockey, so I just always liked music. But here we are today, and talking to you about the American Pope was not on my bingo card, not in my notes that I made about the meeting today. But I do feel like we have to say a few words about an American Pope, and I think that certainly many Catholics across the country are happy. I imagine Joe Biden is happy, and I think Nancy Pelosi is happy. I don't think that J.D. Vance or Steve Bannon or Leonard Leo or Samuel Eliotto are. And I just wondered if you wanted to speak a few words about that sort of conservative Catholic strain in our government and what this new Pope might mean for us.
Yeah, I think I am not a scholar of Catholicism, but I am a scholar of American politics. And this election of the College of Cardinals of this particular Pope, who is the first Pope from the United States of America, but he is also from Peru. He's a Peruvian citizen as well, is important because he is very clearly the American version of Pope Francis. And the Catholic Church, at least in the United States, has gone through a really big schism. And a lot of people are not aware that a number of the people who are in the Trump administration are practicing Catholics, and they are right-wing Catholics who've been using that religion to support their move toward authoritarianism. Tom Homan, for example, who is Trump's border czar, is very open about his standing as a lifetime Catholic. So for the College of Cardinals to pick this man who was really quite a long shot was, I think, and again, I'm not Catholic myself. I do not study Catholicism. Obviously, I teach at a Jesuit and Catholic institution, so I instantly went to my friends who do study those things and asked what this meant. And they felt that it was a significant sign that the Catholic Church is hoping to bring those sort of errant Catholics back into the fold more effectively than they have been for the last many years. But also it's a reinforcement of the reform movement of Francis's papacy. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about that is, again, politically, if we think about what it means for the world that Donald Trump has become president and has instituted the sorts of things that he has in the United States, I think if you think about what people thought, even as much as a year ago, but certainly before that, people like Vladimir Putin of Russia expected that if he could isolate the United States and keep it away from Europe and thereby, with luck from his perspective, crash NATO, he would be able really to expand because the world could not survive without the leadership, the liberal world could not survive without the leadership of the United States. But instead, what we have seen is Europe especially, but also Canada and a number of countries in Latin America and so on, pulling together to create a liberal world without, a world of liberal democracy, or at least not an authoritarian world without the United States. And instead, they seem to be looking at what we are doing. And all these countries that had rising right-wing movements are backing away from them. So we have the German vote that put AFD much lower down than people had expected. And of course, Elon Musk and J.D. Vance had both worked for AFD. And we have the result in Canada, in which Mark Carney, who did not look as if he was going to win before Trump took office, won very handily in Canada. And now we've got the Vatican also saying, well, you know what, we're going to reinforce that we're not moving toward the right. And that's, that's kind of something that, speaking of bingo cards, I didn't have on my bingo card, but it is, I think, cause for hope at a global level that is, going to put pressure here in the United States to move the same direction.
Yeah, when Pope Francis died, I felt this kind of this sense of, oh no, this force for good is gone. Now what? And this has certainly turned things around for me. I feel like the Vatican's on our side, which never thought that I would be smiling about that, but in fact, yeah, it's a good thing. I'm happy about that.
Well, this is one of the things that I think it's going to be important for people in the United States to keep their heads around going forward, because you alluded to earlier that we are looking in the next several months at a really hard time. Things are not going to be good in the United States. We've got the tariffs beginning to bite. We're going to have major legal battles going on. We're going to have people who feel that their backs are against the wall, getting more and more determined to control things. We have cuts in medical care. We've got, and in scientific and biomedical research, it's going to be rough. But one of the things that historians like to emphasize is that, there really is a lot of contingency in human life. And again, when Pope Francis died, I know a lot of people were saying, oh no, this is the worst possible time. We're going to get a conservative pope and he's going to reinforce J.D. Vance and so on, and, and so forth. And instead, that's not what happened. And a lot, and again, somebody like me saying, oh boy, if America steps off the world stage, we're going to go, that Europe is going to collapse. That's not what happened either. And one of the things I think that Joan said and that you alluded to is this is the moment to really throw everything we've got at the reclamation of our democracy, because we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know what's going to happen if we don't do something. And stuff is so unsettled right now. The more voices we bring together, the more community, the more words we say, the more we put out there, the better our chances are of being able to shift that contingency in a good direction.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking a bit about the Pope, and the reason why I believe it's so that we've never had a North American Pope, a Pope from the United States, is that there was always a concern that because we were such a global superpower, there would be too much influence coming from the United States. Of course, now we need good influence. So I frankly think it's a pretty big. I think it's a major statement by the Vatican. I do. It's a review of what's going on.
I would think so too, except as I say, I'm not an expert at all on.
Neither am I. I'm a former Catholic, but I have enough knowledge about it that I think that it's what it feels like to me.
Well, I would say the same, but I'm not even a former Catholic, so I don't feel like I can speak for the Cardinals, but I can tell you that in American politics, it feels like a big deal.
Yeah, yeah. So I was looking at your column, as I bet most of the people on this call have, or maybe they put it off for a little later today, from May 7th. And it is, I was hearing a soundtrack of just like suspenseful music throughout. You were writing about, and you started with the alarm appears to be rising about how Doge is consolidating data about Americans. And one of the figures that, people can go back and read this if they haven't already, but one of the figures that showed up is my least favorite or scariest villain of all, Curtis Yarvin, appears here again. And this fellow does not, doesn't believe in democracy. He thinks it's sort of outdated and messy, and he believes in a monarchy. I believe he was just at Harvard this week debating with a political theorist from there. And I've seen his name pop up in your column from time to time. And I don't know, is he one of the villains that you're watching? He seems to have really captured the imagination of some important people in the administration, which I think is a bad thing.
Yeah, he's not an important thinker at all if you actually read him, and I'm not encouraging people to do that. He's very long-winded. His hallmark is he just kind of goes off on whatever tangent. And in fact, he does believe that we shouldn't have democracy. It's too slow, it's too messy, and we need to do things like completely change American society, instantly, because that's the only way you can entirely rebuild it. And he's not very well versed in actual human society and the way that works or anything. He's not a thinker that anybody would have heard of, except He has the ear of Peter Thiel, of Elon Musk, now of the people who are running the US government. And when you take the ideas of a fringe thinker and you put them in the hands of the US government, which is, has 334 million people in its country and, was at least the richest and most powerful country in the world, all of a sudden you have to pay attention to those ideas. So if you think about that column, what I did is I set up, first of all, what seemed to me to be clear from the beginning, that Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, which once again is not an official agency of the US government, which must be created by Congress, it was very clear from the beginning they weren't actually auditing things or looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, because they went into the positions they went into instantly targeting data. That was really very clear. And that, that's one of the ways that historians go about something is don't listen to what people say, look at what they do. And what they did was to target data. So that was pretty clear. And now we have today in the news, I guess it was very late last night, or maybe it was across the midnight timeline, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary of Health and Human Services, saying that he is going to find the actual cause of autism. Throw out all the scientists. He is going to find the actual cause by looking at the information from people's smartwatches, their health records, and insurance claims. That's a pretty clear melding of a lot of different databases that previously have been kept siloed. So you couldn't do things like, slice and dice the American electorate to manipulate them or to threaten them or to do any of the many things that an authoritarian government like China would do. So I started with that, but then it was very clear to me that I've always thought that, and I have no inside information here, but again, if you look at their behavior, it has always looked to me as if both Donald Trump and Elon Musk were very short of money. That is, they show up as billionaires, but their constant, insatiable need for cash suggests to me that as much as coming in is also flowing out. And so I started to look at Starlink as its relationship to the FAA as a way to actually get the FAA contracts that Verizon got in 2023. But it was very clear very quickly that they weren't just trying to get contracts, that they were actually trying to push SpaceX as well. And then, that guy, Paul Sappho, who does futures predictions in technology, really interesting guy. And, he looks at systems analysis, and he's the one who said to me, Curtis Yarvin, this is all about destroying the concept of city-states that we've lived with since the Treaty of Westphalia, and instead replacing it with this idea of networks of network states. And he said, think of them like lily pads on a body of water, that they're not joined together physically, they're joined together across the internet. And then, of course, when you look at Starlink's terms of service and it says it doesn't apply on Mars, you realize that this stuff sounds, to me anyway, like it's complete tinfoil hat crap. And I think it really is. I don't think Elon Musk is going to Mars. I'm sorry, maybe I'm really off base with that, but I sure don't think he's going to Mars, and I don't think he's going there by 2029. But those people who have these crackpot theories now have the power of the federal government behind them, and they can do one, hell of a lot of damage before they fail. And that's what concerns me.
I'm with you on that. There was the New York Times did a big piece on Curtis Yarvin, I believe in December, and I looked at his face and I didn't even want to read it, but I finally forced myself to do it. I was so upset. And then I listened to it, and listening to him, you can envision the tinfoil hat. He's provocative, doesn't answer questions correctly, and of course has said the most terrible things about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So he's in a position of power. And speaking of this kind of, this surveillance and this data and this sort of greed, which kind of is the word that keeps coming to mind. I was thinking about the movie Wall Street, and Gordon Gekko, greed is good. I thought we had moved past that because it was so unpleasant, but here we are with so much greed. And over the years, over the past 5 or 6 years, I have been in conversation with people who want to or try to explain enthusiastically what crypto is about. And my eyes would kind of cross and I didn't want to pay attention, but I wish I had paid more attention so I'd really be able to understand it. But it's pretty crazy. This kind of crypto Gilded Age with this World Liberty Financial, which I believe so to talk to us a little bit about just the intricacies and the relationships and how it feels a little like bribery. I don't know, probably the wrong word, but it just kind of feels like that. So
No, I'm laughing here because I don't want to know this stuff. You know,
Right.
honestly, I really don't. And I will say that the argument behind somebody like Yarvin or Thiel or Musk or you know, all the people like that is that the kind of government that FDR set up that creates equality or attempts to create equality for women and religious, ethnic, and gender minorities makes it impossible for these really great men to do whatever they want. You know, it really is a vision of a sort of Ubermensch, and that's just not the way the world works. But you know exactly where that goes. The word Ubermensch itself should tell you where that goes. Cryptocurrency ties into that whole idea of getting rid of nation states because, and I actually had to do a deep dive on cryptocurrency the other day because I didn't understand it, and I knew a little bit, but not enough to explain it clearly. So it's important to remember that it's called cryptocurrency, but it's not actually currency. Currency is money that has been agreed upon by a state and is protected by law that can be used in transfers, legal tender. So we could agree um, that shells are currency, or we agree in the United States that paper is currency, or we could agree that fancy rocks are currency, or we could agree that beer bottles are currency, but we have to have a shared agreement that is protected by law. That's not crypto. Cryptocurrency is not a state-based currency. Instead, it's regulated in different ways in different places, but it's better to think of it like an asset. So you can invest in it and it might make gazillions of dollars, but it could also crash. And the kind of asset I think of, I always first go to tulip bulbs, which is the famous, you know, boom and bust. But Beanie Babies is a great way to think about it. If you invested in Beanie Babies early on and you were part of that whole thing, you made a lot of money. But a lot of people jumped into Beanie Babies and then they collapsed, and now all you've got is a nice little fuzzy toy that you paid $200 for or whatever. So the issue then is that crypto, you can have these investments, these coins. And the reason that I got into it is because World Liberty Financial is a cryptocurrency that the Trump administration, the Trump organization controls the most of. They have the most percentage of it. I think it's about 80%. And people can invest in that coin, and the Trump organization takes a serious cut of those investments. But because it is an asset that's associated with Trump, you don't have to know who's investing in that money. So what's happened is that people who want to essentially buy favor from the president are buying those coins. And the most famous one is Justin's son, who's a Chinese national who was in trouble with the SEC and bought $75 million worth of that coin. And then his problems with the SEC got significantly less and perhaps will go away. But it's not just that, because there's another kind of currency under World Liberty Financial that's called a stable coin. And a stable coin is tagged to a real currency. So that one happens to be tagged to pegged to the United States dollar. And the idea is, it's not always the case, but the idea is that is much more stable than crypto, which can go up and down all the time. And that's actually what happened with well, I'll tell you about that in a second. So the last week, the government of the United Arab Emirates invested in a stable coin produced by World Liberty Financial, again, something that is controlled by the Trump organization, $2 billion in the process of doing a deal with a crypto exchange called Binance. And the reason that matters is because the way stable coins make money, because they're stable, they're pegged to a currency, is if you invest in them, the people who you invest your money in them, the people who control that currency can then invest it, and they keep the money that they make in the investing. So essentially, the UAE gave Donald Trump's organization $2 billion to invest, and they can keep that investment money. It can be worth up to tens of millions of dollars every year. And then, of course, there's the meme coin, which is a coin that is associated with a meme on the internet. And that's kind of like buying, I don't know, it's just some novelty. And Trump, 3 days before he went into office, created his own Donald Trump meme coin. And that, of course, skyrocketed. But over the course of his administration, it dropped about 88%. And so a couple of weeks ago, he said the top 220 holders of his meme coin could have a private dinner with him and then a private tour of the White House. That happened. It got very active in the first, I think, couple of days after he made that announcement. There was so much trading in it that there were about $900,000 worth of trading fees produced. And of course, that goes to the Trump organization. So cryptocurrency is, again, think of it like an asset, but this administration is using that asset for its own good. And of course, the Trump administration has decided to invest in cryptocurrency for the American people, but you can see why there's a huge problem. The argument is it's going to make gazillions of dollars. It could also lose gazillions of dollars, and they're talking about creating this cryptocurrency reserve.
So the grift is on, basically, and we don't know who's buying influence. It's the darkest of the dark money in some ways, I guess. And you can draw a line from this, or directly from Citizens United to this. And I think this is, it's such a big problem. And of course, the immunity ruling last year is that's why it feels like we're on this runaway train. But I want to say that we have had a couple of successes, and our Bay Area Coalition was a part of it with our phone banking. In Wisconsin, we were so excited about Susan Crawford basically beating out Elon Musk and his, vulgar use of our election system to try to buy votes. And then also in North Carolina, we were so excited about Jefferson, Jefferson, this is his last name, Griffin, finally conceding that race after 6 months. And so bravo to Allison Riggs. So there are some good stories. And I don't know if you saw in 60 Minutes, Mark Elias was on last week, and Mark is such a hero, and talk about someone who probably is under constant threat, and yet he is fighting so hard, so many lawsuits, as well as I believe it's John Kecker, he's a San Francisco attorney, and he's put together about, I think, 500 law firms, I guess, who are pushing back against. So these are promising things, certainly for us.
I would say more than that. And of course, we're here to encourage people to really step up and, find your squad, get out there, make your voices heard in this moment. Because in fact, for all that we're talking about the consolidation of power in the Trump administration, what we're really seeing is an administration that is in deep disarray. And the pushback that it's getting is making a huge difference in terms of what is going to be able to pass through Congress and what the administration is going to be able to do. And I think it is also behind the plummeting popularity of both Musk, of course, who's nobody likes Musk, but also of Donald Trump, whose numbers have fallen in every single demographic. And the only one in which he is not underwater, and by underwater, what we mean when we say that is more people dislike them than like them. The only one in which he is not underwater is, get this, rural Republicans. And rural Republicans are about 50-50 in terms of their approval. It's not actually 50, it's more like 45-45, because there's a bunch of people who are like, I don't know what's going on. But that means every single demographic in this country says they're not happy with the way the direction of the country is going. And that is really important, because in a democracy, you demonstrate your legitimacy by representing the people. And especially in the United States of America, where quite literally our Constitution is based on the sovereignty of the people. In that document, we say, we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, are setting up this government. But if that government ceases to have our support, it is no longer a legitimate government. And this summer, as all these things start to come, all these dominoes start to fall, it's going to be up to us to keep the pressure on, but also to articulate what we want on the other side of this. The country is never going back to January 19th, 2025. And there were a lot of things that weren't going so well that day, if you remember. So we got to figure out what it is we want and what we envision for the future, because somebody's going to have to be on the other side of that to pick it up and run with it.
Exactly. And speaking of polling, I did see in the Cook Political Report yesterday, they posted a special headline, that Trump is having a slump with young Latino and independent voters. So that's very good news, because that was incredibly discouraging news. The last election, he did receive so much support. So can we, I know you don't have too much time, but I just want to say your speech at the Old North Church, I know many people read the text of the speech, which you shared with us on Letters from an American. I read it, it was beautiful. And then I went and I watched it, and my voice is cracking just because it was so stirring and beautiful. And I know you were there, you wrote it, and I believe on Facebook you said you worked crazy hard on this. So it meant a lot to you. Have you seen the video of your speech? And if you haven't, you should, Heather. It's really something.
I have not, but having given me that opening, I was very proud of that speech in the end. I mean, you never know it's gonna be okay, but I was very proud of it. But it was an extremely hard speech to write, because everybody in there who's done it before, who gives a speech like that, goes really big ideas. But in this moment, we're all about individuals. It's a different moment than it was when Gerald Ford gave the speech 50 years ago. And it's a different moment than a minister would do. So the structure of that speech was, I started general and big, and then I went to a smaller group and a smaller group and a smaller group, and then down to 2 friends. And then the individual were the people who were listening. And that, telling the story that way was not easy, I'll let you know. But I was proud.
You did a fabulous job. And when you talk about getting down to the individual, and you pointed out places in the church where people were sitting that you were actually reading about, to bring that moment to life in the way you did. And I don't know if you remember the last words, but I certainly wrote them down. I read them, unless you remember, about the lighting of the lamps sounds like such a very little thing to do. And yet by doing it, they risked imprisonment or even death. It was such a little thing, but it was everything. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think the God's honest truth of what happened the next day. Sure.
Yes, and the thing that obviously I was talking about the present in that speech, and the thing
Yeah.
that really jumped out, and the reason that I pointed to the places in the church was because we talk nowadays about how divided America is, and it really isn't. The politicians are divided, but if you look at what people think about hot button issues, we're largely in alignment on most, not on all of them. But what really floored me, and actually what gave me the idea to set the speech up that way, was I had no idea that the Old North Church, the one where Paul Revere's friends hung the lanterns in the steeple, was an Anglican church. That was where the Governor General of Massachusetts, the royal governor, the guy who's going to be sending troops after Revere and Dawes, that's where he worshiped. So he is sitting there like 4 pews back from the guy who hung the lanterns in the steeple. And the minister who told me about this, he said, yeah, we figure it was the church was a third loyalists, a third patriots, and a third people who just wanted it all to go away. And I thought, that's kind of a microcosm for our world, isn't it?
Uh-huh. That was a great bit of suspense too, that it was an Anglican church when you talked about that. So I encourage everyone who hasn't read it to just go and watch the video, and you have to watch it too. Heather, you'll be so proud of yourself. And their lighting is so dramatic, and standing up there, and is that the lectern or the pulpit? I'm not exactly sure, but it was good stuff.
I think it's a pulpit, and I will say, I should watch it, because one of the things that I have learned in doing what I do now is that when they do lights, the lights are adjusted so they're good for the audience, not for the speaker. And so I was actually quite uncomfortable because the lights were exactly in my eyes. So normally I would have looked around and stuff, but every time I looked up, and they were very, very bright. I was blinded, so it was a little bit hard to read what I was doing. So that's because of the lights.
Yeah, you got it right. It was terrific. And I'm going to bring Susan on, because it is 2:55 and we know that you have somewhere to be. So let's spotlight Susan, bring her back. And thank you so much, Heather, for everything you do.
Thank you very much, everybody. And let's get out there and do this. This is our summer. We got to go do this. And thank you for having me, Susan.